Hey, it's Donna Cravata, and we are here today with another wisdom panel. And this is a panel on women's leadership. I'm going to do quick introductions, and then we're going to get right into it. We have Janet Barrett, who's an organizational psychologist, founder, and CEO of Cerebral Health. She's an author and a speaker. Marybeth Gregg is a speaker, author, founder of the International Center for Women's Leadership, and Christine Campbell Rapin is a business mentor, consultant, and owner of Clear Acceleration. Jeannie Spiro is a business coach, speaker, podcast host, and a whole lot more. And Rachel Braun Scherl is a speaker, author, Vagipreneur, and a champion of women's sexual and reproductive health. If you've got questions or comments, whether you're watching live or on the replay, put them in, tag us. We will come back and keep this conversation going. And let's dive right in. So let's start with, since it's the women's leadership panel, let's talk about self-leadership. What does this mean to you? How does this show up in your life, in your work? And why does it matter? Who wants to start?
Well, I'll start because leadership traditionally has been, you have to be high up in the company, have a certain title, but I think that's changing a lot, especially for women. And it's how we rule and take control of our lives, not someone else's. And, I've learned, especially getting older, that our values become more and more important to us and how we live those. I think one aspect of self-leadership certainly is courage, that we have the courage to be who we are, not how somebody else defines us.
I love it.
I love that. And I absolutely echo everything you just said. The thing that I would like to add to that is that as my values and everything have grown throughout my life, as I self-lead, I really focus on ensuring that what I'm spending my time on is aligned with those values, as opposed to necessarily what someone else wants. And I will say I struggle with that, but it is something that has truly become very important to me.
One of the things that I think is so critical is really understanding why it's so important to lead. So we spend a lot of time learning skills, functional skills, finance, accounting, marketing, strategy, whatever the case is. And then we don't spend enough time focused on how we're going to communicate that. And to me, that's really, about finding your leadership voice. How do you get people to essentially, I do this with businesses also, to buy what you're selling? How to communicate, what is your style, how comfortable do you feel, have you practiced really basic fundamental things, because you can have done all the greatest work, but if you don't know how to present it, either in visual or oral communication, then a great idea sometimes doesn't get anywhere because of how it's presented.
Yeah, it just hits the wrong way, and it just gets,
or it doesn't hit.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it just gets stopped. That's great. Anyone else?
Yeah, personally, for self-leadership, for me, it took me a long time to step into my role as an individual business owner, as a small business owner, and I was such a good leader in my corporate work. And it took me a long time to get comfortable as a leader of my own business and to be able to teach other women how to step in and lead their teams and their communities. And it's been almost 14 years now, and I finally feel like I've landed in a place where I'm so much more comfortable in saying I can take time off and I can show the women I work with how to do it because I've put myself first. And I didn't do that for a long time in my past life. I was always working for someone else. So I felt like I was trying to break those habits for the first few years. And now I can confidently say I have a lot stricter boundaries around my own leadership, time off, and what I need.
What I love about this word is that it's two different words. The first one is self, and I think that gets lost in a lot of the equation. And we look externally. We do. We're conditioned to look externally. We're happy to be more comfortable in the leadership space. But the moment I say, what do you want? It's a very targeted, simple question. And I had this debate with a lot of my girlfriends because I always ask the question like a laser, what do you want? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, bullshit. Ooh, excuse me. Sorry. I said, I don't believe that for a second, that you don't know what you want. I think you've known since the moment you were born. I think you get to evolve around it. You get to decide when to go forward, when to go back, when to go sideways. But the most important thing about the self-leadership piece is it's up to you to light your own fire. And I tell clients when they come in to work with me, I said, I am a fuel source for you as a business mentor and a strategist, but I cannot light your fire. And every amazing woman leader I know, the moment they make the shift is when they say, I'm doing this for me. It's self-leadership. It's saying, I want this. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to put myself out there. And when we do, it's beautiful to see other women celebrating experiences of other people's self-leadership. But it's really important that you sit with the stillness and say, what do I want? Can I look at myself in the mirror and be able to hold my gaze, to articulate it, and say I can achieve it? When I find others' fuel sources, but I have to be the one to first whisper it. And then being in great communities will help you to roar it. And that's what we're here for. That's what the rise is happening. I think we're in this beautiful rise of the creator because we're saying I'm worthy by simply breathing. I want the following. And how can I get there? In co-creation energy.
I love everything. I'm not a big, I'm not that skilled in the stillness piece, but
Yeah,
I was on board with everything else.
yeah. Stillness is still a real work in progress.
Yes.
But I will tell you, my whole way I would get around that is I always say stillness is actually not the absence of movement. It's moving fast at a high vibration. So as long as I encapsulate that, I'm like, I'm okay to find stillness. It doesn't mean stopping.
I really struggled with the concept of what do I want for a very long time. And I've had this conversation recently about I was a really great chameleon. I could be what anybody wanted. And it started from a very young age because I just wanted people to like me. And I was willing to do whatever it took. And so now asking me that question, one, makes me very uncomfortable because I'm like, oh gosh, me, you want me to make that choice? And taken me a long time to really be like, okay, that's okay. It's okay to want something for you. It's okay to own that that is what you want. But I still even struggle going, is that really what I want? Because I didn't grow up that way. I didn't evolve for a very long time thinking about what I wanted. And I love that you encourage people to do that because I do. I still struggle with that.
I love
one of the things
that use the word evolve because I just got called on this because you may think maybe I've got it all together, but I kept saying that I was reinventing myself. And someone said, you're not reinventing yourself. You're evolving to the truer onion that you always were. So I love that you chose that word and unintentionally because I think it is spot on. We don't reinvent, we evolve to it.
Well,
and what I would say with it, the part, Janet, of being a people pleaser, which many women, I would say, I don't know what the right verb is, suffer from or deal with or, you know, make their lives harder with, is Brene Brown said she says many brilliant things, but this particular thing she said in her Netflix special, and I'm paraphrasing her brilliance, is if every day you're not uncomfortable at some point, you're not trying hard enough. And for me, that became a very good tool to just reinterpret that feeling. You know, for me, it's a feeling in the pit of my stomach. I don't know where other people experience it. And now instead of that feeling being something that stops me, it's a feeling that propels me because it's okay not to feel comfortable. And now I say to myself, well, if I'm not comfortable, I must be doing the right thing, which is a real shift from being stopped by the discomfort. I think we all in various roles at some point of every day, if not every hour, you know, are experiencing a whole range of feelings. And the idea that in and of itself, that feeling that used to feel negative can be a source of strength is really meaningful to me. And so I always keep that quote in my head as you're doing, you're on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a really powerful book. It's called Women Who Run with the Wolves. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it is, talk about inspiration. And it's about us being domesticated, over centuries or thousands of years, but how that wild woman is still in us. And we just got to let it out. And when we do, oh my God, it feels so great, right? And that is putting ourselves first, that's not selfish, that's self-love. And to get in touch with that wild woman is it's exhilarating. And why don't we do it more,
Well, it's important to build the communities that create the safety for it, because truthfully, as leaders, what we are often doing is managing and mitigating an unsafe environment. A lot of psychological safety, especially in the workplace, still exists, still within teams, still within families, still within communities. And so I know one of the big things that, I have this great passion for Donna all about was, I'm going to build the space. Because I said, we have to be iconic. That's a self-leadership choice, which is I'm going to light up something that's dark, and I'm going to create the communities to have brave conversations, to challenge that, and to be unapologetic with this whisper that builds momentum for everybody else. And also feels just like this energetic rise that says, oh, so this is what I was, this is more in flow. Like it just goes, why was I trying to contort myself into this weird box?
And building on that, another idea around that is you won't always get it right. I mean, it's not even evolution over a long period of time. Sometimes it's a daily or weekly experience. And I throw a lot of test balloons out and see, how does this feel? Did this work? Was this strategy the right approach? Was that communication style effective? And I use it. Your own work can become your own research lab, because it's not like, to Christine's point and the other points that were made, that there's one point in time or one spot you're trying to get to. But there are different challenges along the way, and that is critical to. For me, it's not getting to a place, it's getting to how you want to live, which is personal, professional, financial, emotional, all those things.
Yeah, and when you start to do the work that you really truly want to do, that line between work and life is very grayed.
It's just life.
Yeah,
there's just life. I'm just doing life.
Yeah,
and the lens I see the world.
Exactly. So we touched upon this a little bit, celebrating success and self-love. And that was one of the reasons that I created this community, because I wanted women like us who are out there every single day, quietly or not so quietly, making a difference. But, we're not on the Forbes list, and, we're not paying to be on a list. We're just out there doing the work every day that needs to be done. And I wanted to create a space where we can celebrate each other, we could celebrate together, and really claiming it is important. And, keeping that self-love piece alive, because the only way that we're going to challenge ourselves and put ourselves into those uncomfortable spaces and, do something that's harder and new and unexpected is by caring and loving for ourselves. So let's dive into this one.
I think the hardest thing we have is to celebrate ourselves. We're really good at organizing parties for others. And I know I am much more intentional at this last round of the sun than ever before about what and how will I celebrate myself. And I spend time quarterly on a personal CEO day, and I spend a good portion of the time saying, how will I celebrate this? And I really challenge myself to spend time when I'm working with my clients on, what did you celebrate? Not did you hit the goal? I mean, we're goal-driven people, we're drivers by nature, that's who I serve. But I said, what did you do to celebrate this? And this was a classic example. I have a client of mine that's come through a very difficult period of her business, starting 24. And it has been, I'm sure, soul searching. Should I quit the field? And she did not quit the field. And I said, where are you now in celebrating? She said, I haven't. I said, you've landed 6 clients and pulled yourself out of the abyss. When most people quit the field, what did you do to celebrate it? She's like, nothing. I'm like, get on your feet right now. And she's like, no. I'm like, no, seriously, we're going to dance for the next 2 minutes around the room because you need to take this moment. And she's like, I got to go to the next thing. And I'm like, no, sweetheart, there's nothing more important than realizing your awesomeness and the fact that the tenacity in this win got a moment to breathe. Like, I think we need to really talk about this as an essential part. It takes seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else have anything to add on that?
I do. I work with a lot of women who have transitioned into this work, and many of them started their business in their 40s, 50s, even later. And they're coming in from experience and having great experience elsewhere. And oftentimes I have to shine a mirror, or you turn the mirror on them to show that how successful they are and what they're doing and doing this at this stage. And I think one of the things that I've found is that I wasn't celebrating myself so much for the first couple of years in business. I was working so hard to achieve goals that I wasn't looking at all the things that I've done, even what someone would consider a small milestone. And so I celebrate everything inside now. I celebrate the fact that I'm almost 58 years old and I still love what I'm doing. I celebrate a win, every single thing. And it's because I think for a long time, I was celebrating others' successes. And now I get to celebrate my own. And so sort of as a champion for all of my clients, I help them turn the lens. I help them look at themselves and say, congratulations for doing this work all the time. This is so important. So I think we can't forget to love ourselves in the journey of, especially the people I work with who are entrepreneurs. It's a hard journey and you have to love yourself, all of it along the way.
I still have to be reminded to celebrate myself and what I'm doing and who I am. It's still, I don't know, I forget about it. We're nurturers, we're mentoring others, we're coaching others, and we kind of get lost. We're such givers. I recently picked up a book. It's called Remember Love. And in the O of the love is the word tender. And I thought about, gosh, who talks about being tender or tender times and being tender to ourselves? It puts such a different spin on things that we get to love ourselves and nurture ourselves and honor ourselves. And that tenderness really, really gets lost in business for sure.
I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is, it's talking about women over 50. And I think that implies, at least in my life, you might have a little bit more space than you did. I mean, there are many of people in their 50s who are still caring for children, caring for parents. I think the work that we're talking about requires some actual space and time. So I remember for me, I have adult kids. When the youngest one went off to college, I didn't realize I'd been sort of holding my breath for 18 years trying to juggle. So I think some of this, I feel for my own self, is you have to create the space, but you also have to be cognizant. And sometimes you're in a stage of your life where there is no space to be created, where the demands, of your business and of your family and of your community and fill in the blank are so great that there's not a time, at least I'll go back to stillness, for stillness or reflection. Sometimes you really are in survival mode. And I see that with, many of the companies that I work with in women's sexual and reproductive health. Sometimes you're just focused on surviving.
Yeah.
And you have to acknowledge that you go through periods where that's the case in life and business. I'm sure in the work that so many of you do. To have the space and to create the space sometimes feels like a luxury that you don't have. And I'm sure that the folks on this panel help people get out of that space. But I know for me, there have been many times where you're saying, if this happens, if I get to there, if I get to here, if I'm still walking upright by the time this happens, I can do it. But I don't want people to take away, this is doable. It's just lack of initiative or effort.
Yeah.
There are periods in your life and in your career when it's extremely, extremely difficult to do the things that are so important for yourself. And we've all been in that space where, we've come at the end of the list, and sometimes that just happens. And to me, I consider it really a luxury and a gift when you get to move yourself from another place to another spot in the line.
Yeah, I
So
was there, because I'm a single parent, and, it never even occurred to me that, like, I can make time for myself for years and years
and that
and
might have been real. That
it
might
was
have literally been real
it
between
was
working
real.
and
It
taking
was
care of
real.
your kids.
It
There
was
is no
real.
time. Yeah.
There was no time, and then when my son went off to college, there was the time, and I didn't wanna be that person that, suffered from the empty nest syndrome. I wanted to take that time and really leverage it and use it, and, you know, it was finally my time, and it was really exciting because my whole life I was taking care of people. It was the first time that I'd ever not had to take care of anybody but me and a cat, and it was really good. It was really good. Um,
So
and then
I'm still in that. I'm in my 50s. I'm a single mom. I have 4 teenagers, and I totally and completely understand what you're saying about that. What has actually made me really conscious of it is I did not grow up celebrating any of my successes. I hid them. I did not talk about them. I grew up in the Midwest, so we don't talk about anything anyway. But I was very aware of going through, and I had some really great things happen, and I was very uncomfortable. And I watched my kids try and celebrate me, and I realized the bad example that I was setting for them by not taking time to do it. And I don't have a lot of time, and I get that. But what I've tried to do is instead looking at the small things throughout the day that I can celebrate and show them, like, hey guys, guess what? I got to be on the Real 50 Over 50 panel today. And they'll get excited for me about that. And to try and make them more comfortable than I ever was going through my day. And I agree, I don't get to do a lot of big things right now. Someday I will have that empty nest and I can
Mhm.
do that. But so I've focused more on some of those little things as the days go on for both me and my kids and the people that I work with, to help them start incorporating that, to make them just in general more comfortable with the concept.
And
Well,
those little things matter.
and they do. And a great way to do is start making the list. What's the things that bring me pleasure during the day? And I'm in this exercise right now in a mastermind that I'm part of, because we're talking about growing to the next level. And they said the thing that will grow you to the next level is self-love.
Mhm.
Honestly, more than anything else.
Yeah.
So what are the things that bring you pleasure? And it can be everything from, yes, big, amazing milestone achievements, but it's textures, sounds, scents, the way you put your office environment together, the nice pen in your hand. It can be really simple things, but what's important is the practice of the mindfulness that said, breathe in 2 seconds, breathe out 2 seconds. That was self-care. And I took recognition of it, because truthfully, that is something we have power for. And sometimes the biggest things, I don't even know what's on the list. And it's been a really fun and challenging exercise, which is I'm not going to accept 3 on the list, because I was like, oh, I'll do 3 things because, it's super efficient. And they're like, no, I want 25. And then I'm going to say to you, today's number 17, find a way to do 17 sometime in your day. All right.
And I think that's such an important point, because if we wait till 10, 15 years or 18 till everybody's out of the house, we're like a puddle, we don't have much left to give to ourselves or to other people. And is those tiny things, my book is called Finding Tiny Moments of Joy Every Day. And I've had to do that in the ups and downs of my life. And to me, one of the biggest things is just go outside and look at the sky, look at the leaves or the birds or whatever. I'm down in Florida right now, and I was at my desk and my computer for like 5 hours. Like, I got to get out of here. So I ran out, went down to the beach, and I just settled in. It's like, I'm just going to read. And I looked up at the sky, and there was a magnificent rainbow. It was absolutely incredible. And if I hadn't looked up, I would never have seen it. So this joy, and Christine, what you were talking about, it's just all around us. We just have to be aware and take that breath and go, 5 minutes for me, whatever that is. And every day, though, every day.
I think that is so interesting. I remember when COVID first started and everybody was posting, oh, I gave up sugar, I run 76 miles, I do yoga every day, I became a gourmet cook. And I would say, stop the madness. And I think there's something to take one thing that
Mhm.
you can accomplish. It's not, today isn't the day you're going to transform every single aspect of your life. But if your goal is to get outside and you do it, great. If your goal is to finish a presentation today and you do it, great. If the goal is to have, a delicious meal, just I'm so conscious of as women, and because I run businesses that focus on women, so I'm always talking about women's health, which includes mental health. I don't like the idea that we can set ourselves up to be self-loving and self-affirming and add that to another long list of things that we have to do. So, just keep that in mind that all of this, it's a balancing act. So if, I'm sure most people can find 2 minutes a day to go outside. Don't start with, I'm going to start running and next week I'm going to do a marathon. It's really all about baby steps and moving forward. And some days you have the energy and the spirit to take giant leaps, but that might not be every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this self-love is not about to do, it's about to be, right? To
I
get
love
inside and figure out, how do I want to be right now? How do I want to feel right now? So it's not adding to the list, it's just getting in touch with what we need.
Yeah.
I personally feel like I disconnected from that side of myself for such a long time, and in my corporate life, and I was working in a very masculine world, and I never felt that I could put myself first. I was raising a family with my husband at the time. I'm still married. It doesn't sound like that, like what I just said, but we were raising 2 children, and I was so focused on work and business and in my masculine all the time that I got sick because I wasn't taking care of myself and I wasn't nurturing myself. So part of what I've thought through as a business owner is this growth that I've experienced and trying to balance, not diving too far into my masculine to work, but to also balance the self-care, the self-love, the self-talk, and that it's actually so supportive to my growth and how I show up as a business owner and coach to my clients and in my family. And I used to think that I was weak for nurturing myself in that way, or not showing up, strong or in my strength. But it's so good to talk about the things that I'm doing, the healthy things that I feel like I'm doing, and also being a leader to my clients who want to be able to have balance in their business. So I love this topic so much, because I think I was not good at it for a really long time.
Yeah. I'm still a work in progress. But that's got to be part of my my New York law firm upbringing.
Well, and I got to say that work in progress, like one of the most beautiful life lessons I was given. I was probably about 20, and it was from my bestie, who is still my bestie today. And we were going through the period of university, and there were some big changes going on, as naturally happen at that time of your life. And she said, it's okay to love yourself still as a work in progress, because we love you as a work in progress. And just keep showing up, committed to being the work in progress. And it is echoed through all of my life in seasons when, all of it feels messy. And she's like, why did you think it wouldn't? You're still a work in progress. You don't, I think when we talk about clarity, and a lot of my business is about, people come to me to help with that question, who am I, what do I want? Because I'm going to ask you, who are you, what do you stand for? If we're going to build a business that creates wealth and client attraction around it, it's part of the fundamental. So clarity isn't the thing that you put into your notebook at Tuesday at 2 p.m. I'm going to go to Starbucks to get clarity. Like, we've set ourselves with this expectation that it's a task. And it's, yes, we can have a great notebook and that feels like self-care, and we can have a really decadent coffee, and we can set the environment up. But truthfully, the work in progress is the evolution. And said, that's what we're celebrating.
Mm-hmm.
I am still here choosing the evolution, and it's a hot mess every other moment.
I love that. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Oh, I'm going to find clarity, on Tuesday at Starbucks. And to go back to what Marybeth said, it's not a task. And I know for me, certainly as a, I'm constantly focused on outcomes, it is very hard to break those habits. And so when it comes to that, I absolutely am a work in progress. What feels good is what feels normal, and coming out of your pattern is sometimes create some discomfort to get to a better, better place. The other thing I wanted to add is that in addition to making the space, I always feel like everybody needs some activity, some retreat, something that re-energizes them. For me, it's energy and mindless, law and order kind of dramas. Something where my head is just out of
That's
my
my favorite.
day to day. I'm not, necessarily reading War and Peace in the original language at that point, but just something that literally changes sort of your body temperature or gets you some endorphins. I've always found that without that, and when I neglect what those things are, because obviously law and order can't solve any of the cases without me. Without that, you become back to at 2 p.m. I'm going to do clarity.
For 6 minutes.
Right. Because that's the amount of time I have on my schedule for clarity today.
Unless I find a red dot on my phone or social media, and then I go down the rabbit hole and I did it for 3 seconds.
Exactly.
We have about a half an hour left. And I think that we can spend the next half an hour talking about a combination of women's health and aging healthy and mental wellness and resilience, because I think that's something that we all have a lot to contribute to. So let's start with women's health and aging healthy. And, we've all worked in this space and lived this space, and we're not done yet. So let's dive in. Rachel, you have a lot.
I was going to say, Rachel, I know this is your area. I have to say something quickly, if you don't mind. What I wish that we did more of with this particular space is started younger. Because now I'm having to go back and say, oh, that makes sense now. Had I done this, but I didn't know anything about hormones and taking care of my body and what was acceptable, because I'd say to my doctor, this is happening, like, oh yeah, that's normal. No, it actually isn't. And I would love to, I mean, Rachel, this is your area and you know so much more about this than I do, but that is the one wish that I have, is that we would start earlier. And if there's a way that people know how I can do that better, I would absolutely jump on board.
So
Okay.
I think one of the
Can I just say something?
Go ahead, Donna.
One of the things that I want to achieve with this whole project is that we share the stories the things that nobody tells us. So unleash.
So from a women's health sort of business perspective, one of the things that is challenging is really not our fault. It's sort of systemic. So just, at least certainly in the US, I can't speak as much to Canada, but I know this is a trend around the world. We are never taught the vocabulary. There are a subset of states in the US that require sex education, and a subgroup of those don't require it to be medically or scientifically accurate. So you can't make that up. It's required, but we actually don't care if you're sharing drivel with people. That has nothing to do with anything. So a large part of it is you can't have the conversation or ask those questions about hormones unless you have a language. So I've always spent a lot of time, and the companies I work with spend a lot of time, they're filling the space that has been left empty by our healthcare practitioners and by our education systems. And so you see so many companies starting the conversations about hormones because no one ever had them. And how do you ask the question that you don't even know is a problem? How do you know that these 34 things are associated with menopause if nobody tells you? So for me, what's really exciting right now in women's health is there's been a groundswell around this conversation, because there are hundreds of businesses and millions of dollars and governments and people involved in advocacy who are making noise to give us a vocabulary. So for me, I really always start there with the conversation. How do I know how to solve a problem that I don't know exists? And when I go into investment meetings with clients and, the person in the room will say, oh, I already invested in a menopause company, I'm good. I say, okay, well, they clearly don't understand that there are a whole range of symptoms, and that not only is it not a niche, it could be the largest single opportunity for human health in the history of the world, when 1.1 billion women will be in menopause by 2025. So the language has always been so important. And we were joking about, did the White House initiative mention the word vagina? And it's a joke, but there's an enormous amount of discomfort using any of the words for our body parts and how they work. And there's never been an elementary school kid since the beginning of time who was interested in that class where they separated the boys and the girls and give you some basic information. But I will say that it does affect your health to have the right language. And one of the examples that has always been so astounding to me is that there's a growing body of research that says that children, young boys and girls, who are given the right terms for their body parts and what they're capable of doing and how they might fit together, are much more likely to report instances of abuse or trauma. And that's sort of the negative, dark side. But if you think about that and take it to the example, Janet, you gave, if you don't have the language, you are at a handicap for living a healthy life and for aging in place or aging gracefully or really enjoying your life. So before anything else starts, it's education and it's vocabulary, and it's saying things that often make people uncomfortable. When I interview people, I say, listen, we say the word vagina and vulva here many times a day. If you're uncomfortable, that's fine, but then you're not a good fit here, because these are the topics that we're talking about. And so if you can't talk about the business of what we're in, then this might not be the right place for you.
So I used to work in intimate apparel for years.
We have a lot to talk about.
We had women's pants because the men were too uncomfortable saying panty. So if they can't say panty, there is no way that they're going to say vagina. And I'm like, why? It's a word. It is literally just a word that is describing something. Why do we have to have such discomfort around it?
I remember it must have been in the 90s. I can't remember exactly when, but there was an infamous art show, and it was in New York, called The Dinner Party. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but each piece was handcrafted and it was different vaginas. Well, it was such a scandal. And the world, in the area was up in arms about this. This was obscene. And I went to see it with some girlfriends. And I was even like, whoa, this is the first time I've seen this in an exhibition. I mean, they were dinner plates, different vaginas, and very creative, that's for sure. But for that, at that time, was absolutely, it was just unheard of. So, when I grew up, it was even more so than now. And what we didn't say, what you didn't think about or ask about, just didn't do it. So hopefully that is opening up a bit. But, Rachel, what you're saying with education is like, we still have a long way to go with misinformation, for sure.
And we all probably are aware of sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
That, a huge amount of the information people get about health is from social media, and there are certain trends that we see happening. So there's been a big trend away, for instance, from hormonal contraception, which is used for many, many different things, not only pregnancy prevention. And there's a whole social media effort where influencers are talking about how bad hormonal contraception is for you. Now, it might be for an individual, but it's not a conversation or a decision you should be making because an influencer who knows nothing about your history or your body or your other health conditions says so. And so it's also where we get the information and to make sure that it's accurate. And I think, Marybeth, you described something that is so common. I mean, I cannot tell you how many rooms I've been in where I walk in and people are like, oh, there's the vagina lady. And like, as if it's, I'm wearing a scarlet letter, and, I'm proud to be part of this conversation. I'm proud to be working with companies that are finding solutions. Has everyone around me always loved that I'm doing this? No. I joke that when I started, both my kids probably wasn't related. They both switched schools at the time that I got into this space, and I said they went into like the vagina protection program. But it's not comfortable, but it requires work. And I do it all day, every day, and I don't feel any shame about it. And I really focus on it from a business perspective. And that helps me. There are plenty of people in this space who built companies around their personal health struggles. My personal health history has never been part of anything that I do or talk about. For me, that was a red line. But I'm happy to talk about conditions and symptoms and solutions and healthcare. But for me, my line is my personal choices have nothing to do with me building those businesses.
Jeannie?
Yeah, so I started a podcast a couple of years ago, and it came out of this feeling that I kept hearing that women over 50 are invisible. And I was starting to experience this myself. And I also thought, well, this is really interesting because I'm a business owner trying to be seen online and I need visibility. And if I'm invisible as a 50-something-year-old woman, this is going to be quite a challenge. But at the same time, I started having conversations with other women who were having the same thing happen. And another client came to me who was in her 70s, and I thought, what is she doing? How is she working? How does she have this energy? How is she showing up? She's a global thought leader. And I thought, what can I be doing to care for myself at this stage of my life? And how can I start changing my own self-care? And I picked up every book I could possibly read. And I found Norma Kamali, who was talking about how to care for yourself as you're aging. And I started making some conscious decisions about how I wanted to show up and how I wanted to care for myself. And it's very interesting what comes back because of the conscious decisions I'm making. How I'm choosing to take care of my hair or go with herringbones as opposed to full color, or, how I'm doing certain things more naturally than other things. And it goes back to what Rachel was just talking about. Like, these are my personal choices, but because I'm visible in business, I'm also getting a lot of feedback from people. And yet my whole goal is to have energy, be there for my family, take good care of myself, and gracefully transition from this year to the next year to the next, how I want to be doing it. And I think everyone's got their choice in how they do it. But I personally have been feeling like, how can I gain more energy in the next phase to do the work that I want to be doing? And it's less about what I look like and more about my energy. So that's how I've been really trying to reframe things.
I think, the world in the last couple of years has brought us into proximity in many ways. And I mean that from a home environment where, if you have, you share your house with more than your pet, suddenly there's a lot more conversations about the humanness of you because you could not escape each other. And there's a lot of great experimentation. Like, some of the conversations that I'm having in the women's circles I'm having is, our decision to stop coloring our hair. Like, that transition's happened. I don't color it anymore. But it's also saying, what used to work for me doesn't work for me anymore. That's from a fitness perspective, the cardio versus the weights. It's the amount I'm consuming. I said, I haven't changed my food consumption, but my body is totally on a protest. It's just decided it's going to keep everything it's keeping. And I have struggled with that reflection image. And the conversation is, how do you embrace where you are? How do you experiment with what you are? And the gift, you can talk about self-care, the gift is, how do I feel great in this season? Because that wardrobe, that skincare, that way I used to fuel my body is no longer serving me to the same effect. But guess what? I have the choice to experiment and try new things. And so that's where we do create the language. We do create conversations of saying, let's talk about this. And in the world of healthcare, which is so broken in its way, I said, you have to recognize the importance of you advocating for what it's like to have your lived experience. What's it like in your body? What's it like in your sleep patterns? What's it like in how you feel? Because you have to advocate to your partner, to your children, to your own space. Say, this is me in self-care. And then I love what communities can bring, because one of the big conversations I had with my community back at the start of the year was, it's time for a wardrobe overhaul because I'm never going to fit those clothes. And looking at them makes me feel crappy. And so how do you go shopping at this age? Like, and they're like, let's have, who knows? And then all of a sudden there's great popcorn suggestions of, I know some stylists, here's some people I follow. Let's go look at the body type. Let's go actually figure out what the measurements are, because you can find great, fabulous things that make you feel great about your body's experience out there in the marketplace, and then share them.
Last year I had a real awakening about health, and nothing happened to me. It wasn't any condition or anything, but as we get older, things start to shift. And so years before, it's like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to get a trainer, I'm going to walk, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Never did it. And last year, so this was January, a year ago, I've been doing work around intention. So what's my intention? Not my goal, not starting with that, but it's the why. And in the area of health, I had to really sit back and think about, what's my why? Why do I really want to take care of my health? And to me, what came up was, so I can have a better foundation to get me through the rest of my life in a healthy way. Then the goal became, go to the gym, walk 4 times a day, get a trainer. And it was such a, you said reframe, such a shift, because that was a year ago, January, and I've been doing all of those things every day almost throughout the year. But I had to get my why. I had to have this motivation versus, oh, I should go to the gym or do this. That just, those resolutions, those goals don't work. The what becomes the how to get to your intention. And that was really powerful for me.
It's the same as the 2 o'clock Starbucks run. All right, let's.
So I speak about.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I speak about resilience and mental health. And Marybeth, what you were just talking about with the why is what one of the key things that we talk about. It's one of the top 5 things that you have to have. You have to have a why, a purpose. And then if you have that, it's really easy to start bouncing things off of it and see if it fits. And does it support your why, or does it detract from your why? And I had kind of the same thing, which was how I got into the whole hormone and menopause and the body changing and all of that, and looking more deeply into it. Was part of my why was, I want to grow old healthfully, with as healthfully as I can. And I think that means something different for everyone. But I specifically, someday, maybe I'll have grandkids. I have no idea how old I'll be. My kids, nobody's left the house yet, so we still theoretically have a few years. But someday I would like to be able to play with my grandkids, and I'd like to be able to get down on the floor and back up without hurting myself. And so that concept of being able to do that in however many years from now became part of my why. And that led to, okay, well, this is what it's feeling like in my body. And I needed to figure out, how do I accomplish that? And it's when I realized there was a huge gap in my knowledge base about women's health. And I feel like I started with an amazing base, because my mom is a nurse. Well, she was a nurse. She's retired now, but she used real language with us growing up. I knew the anatomical parts. I knew everything that went on and what it was used for, and all of those things that Rachel was talking about. Unfortunately, my mom had breast cancer and never went through peri or menopause. I never heard from her what happened. And she never thought to talk to me about it, because she never experienced it. And so I'm going through it as, from my knowledge, kind of the first woman in my family to do so, because nobody in the past talked about it. And so now, like, I'm spending a lot of time talking to other people to say, let's get more information out about this, because I now know, had I looked at this in my 30s, I would be in a much better situation than I am today, because I would have done some things differently. And I would have known that symptoms that were preventing me from growing old in a healthful way were actually things that I could have done something for. But on the mental health side, now I realize I wasn't crazy. And talking about it and sharing our stories, to what Donna said earlier, has been such an important thing for me to help my mental health. To know somebody else is out there, going through something similar to what I'm going through has been really so important to me, to be able to feel that I'm not alone. I can do this. Other people have done it before. And so I love sharing the stories. And that also is one of those things that goes into resiliency. The purpose of that, and knowing that you have a community and that there's other people out there. And so, what Donna's doing, this is such an amazing gift that you are giving all of us.
And I would say, specifically to the point that you just made, Janet, I would say the thing that I hear the most often with anyone going through menopause, or when they discover a product or they see something that catalyzes their thinking, is, I thought it was just me. Mm-hmm. And so if we do nothing else but create, as I talked about earlier, the conversation around a vocabulary, so that you're not alone. As I said, 1.1 billion women will be in menopause by 2025. 6,000 women are going into menopause every day. 20% of the workforce is in menopause. We're everywhere. So if people knew that, and we had the tools and the way to start a conversation, it would be so much better. And the other thing that is very common now in the narrative around women's health, which is a plus, is that you can't talk about emotional health without talking about physical health, without talking about, the context that you're in. So when you think of menopause, who would know that the same thing that causes you to get bloated and gain weight in your stomach is giving you brain fog or anxiety, or leading to lack of sleep, or that the hot flashes that cause the lack of sleep are the reason that you don't feel, that you're feeling anxious, that you can't be productive. Just the...
Oh, you muted yourself, Rachel. Rachel, you're muted.
For how long? For that whole last piece?
Yeah, about half of it.
So this is live, so I'll just keep
keep going.
But basically, everybody feels the way you described going into menopause. Every bit of market research, every person that you speak to, every company who's coming up with solutions in this space says the very same thing. And at the risk of being repetitive, I don't know if it came through in the last sentence, 6,000 women are entering menopause every day in the workplace. In the US, 20% of the workforce is in menopause. There are now companies who are starting to offer menopause benefits the way we did 25 years ago with fertility and family building, because we know how valuable these people are in the workspace. So if people take nothing else away, what has happened with all of this focus and attention and conversation around women's health is you are not alone. And there are often hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people going through it at the same time. And lots of these companies that I'm working with are about creating that sense of community, so that you know what the symptoms are and you know what some of the solutions are.
Yeah. I remember a comment made to me when I was in the networking space for women. I was in a specific group for women to network in the world of business. And I remember a colleague of mine saying, you'll spend more time in menopause than any other period of your life. And I thought, how come nobody has said that out loud? Like, it feels like we have got this totally unaware. Like, we talk about adolescence, we talk about puberty, we talk about, what happens. But I said, after 20, the only thing I was told is your skin will start to age. Like, that's the only thing I was told. And then when she said, she's like, no, seriously, you will spend more of your life in menopause than any other cycle and anything else. I'm like, that is fascinating. And I just don't even know why I couldn't think and connect those two dots myself. But I said, wow, we need to.
And it is totally true. So when you think about it, people are in perimenopause from, 2 to 10 years. It really is. It depends on the person. And menopause is a moment. It's the day that you haven't had a period for 12 months. So once you haven't had your period for 12 months, you are now, by definition, postmenopausal, and you could be in that for the rest of your life. You could be lucky and have no symptoms. You could experience symptoms for 20 years, but it is such an interesting change. In the conversation, we spend so much time about what to do if you want to get pregnant, what to do if you don't want to get pregnant, and that turns out to be a much smaller chunk of our lives than the part that you're talking about right now.
That's mind-blowing for me.
It is mind-blowing.
And I think the other area that I just don't hear a lot about is I'll call it post menopause. When you're in your 60s, 70s, and even beyond, health related issues are around what's wrong, degenerative, and this is going to happen, that's going to happen. But I can't remember ever hearing conversations around this is what's happening at this point of your life and important things to take care of, be it like your vitamins, mineral, whatever. So, and we call it preventative, but it again back to education. But I don't know much dialogue about that at all, and that population is getting so much bigger as well.
Oh, 100%.
Well, that's why they wanted to keep us all quiet, but that's not going to work.
Nope, we passed that one.
Jeannie's out of the bottle and we're here.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, you talk about mental wellness, and the interesting thing, I think, what I find conversation wise is, one, educate yourself. And I said that comes down to advocating for your own lived experience. But part of that is also the idea of you get to feel it all. And I think there's been so much, and I know certainly from generations and from culture and from religious, and we think that we don't talk. And I said, but one of the things that I have a conversation in my household a lot is all of the feelings you feel are human. And to be able to identify them, to be able to talk about them, and to know you're not defined by them. Because I think in our health world, we got to the place of, if I feel this, let's Band-Aid it, or let's dampen it, or let's medicate it. And I said, it's one thing to feel something and to say, I feel this, versus then this now real, I think, unfortunate shift, which is, I am this. And it's like, be careful, you're a human being in a unique way, but you can feel this without saying this is now my limit. And also to be a real interesting statement, but I find it fascinating. So we always say, you're allowed to feel it all. That's what being in the human experience is. And I think it's important we bring that conversation to the table, because you are truncating your capabilities and the human experience by hiding and not identifying. And at the same time, realize all of us have them, all of them.
One of the reasons why I ended up getting into the mental health space is because when one of my kids was 9 years old, he came to me and he said, Mom, I think the world would be better off without me. And it still hurts. And it was one of those that my world just stopped. And I'm like, what? Like, I just wanted to put him in the biggest hug and say, no, of course not. The world would not be better off without you. But I also knew there was something else going on. It wasn't just that. And so I was really lucky. I got him a really good mental health professional that was willing to work with him. And he called me a couple weeks after he started working with him. And he said, Janet, I'd love to talk to you, because I think I understand why he felt that way. I was like, why? Please tell me. And he said, it's because of the bad thoughts that he has about other people sometimes. Thoughts like, I hate my brother, he stole my toy. Or they cut me off, I could kill them. He thought that simply by having those thoughts made him a bad person. He didn't realize that every single person has those thoughts. And he was like, if I have them, that means I'm bad and I shouldn't be here. And it was great that we learned that and we were able to correct it for him. And he's, much better from having gone through that. But I realized so much of the time we don't talk to people about that yes, you have those thoughts. They're just thoughts. Now, if he actually did kill his brother for stealing the toy, that would be bad. But that's not what happened. He just simply had a thought that we all do. And it makes us normal. It makes us like everybody else. But to your point, Christine, nobody talks about it. And so we started talking about it. And it really prompted some good conversations around what is normal? What should people expect? Is it okay to have some of those thoughts? And I think having more of that conversation is really important.
It is. And we are at an hour. I can't believe it flew by. But if we can just go around the room and leave everybody with a thought, a wisdom bomb, an idea, something actionable that they can, bring their own leadership or self-leadership up a notch.
So I can jump in. I found this quote by Angela Davis that I just absolutely loved. And it's, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things that I cannot accept. And so that's what I've decided to do in my life, is to say, what is it I can't accept? And I've put my money where my mouth is, basically, and started talking about it with as many people as I can, because I think being very proactive in our mental and our physical health is what we all have to do. So I hope everyone will join me.
I have something to add. I think it's all about, we're talking about mindset and shifting and mental wellness, and it's really how you look at life too, your approach and the questions that you ask. And so I have wonderful people in my life that have led by example about asking this question: what's possible versus what's not possible? And so as I enter the next trip around the sun very soon, I think about that. What's possible for me, as opposed to what can't I do? So there's no limit when you think of possibility. So I'll leave you with that.
That's good.
I would say for me, we have this quote in my family all the time, which is helpful not just for sports, but for life. And it's no timeouts, no substitution. The idea is, you sort of play to the death, you live to the death, you leave it all on the field. And I don't mean in a morbid way, but life is long. There are hard things, but you have to always stay in the game, whether it's the game of your business, the game of your marriage, the game of your family. But there's really, no one can play you. There's no understudy for your own life. And so if this is your option, make sure you're spending the time the way that you want. And I will say one other thing that is just a personal challenge I have. When people say, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. I love what I do, and many days it feels like work. So I'm all about setting reasonable expectations. You can still love what you do and be doing the right thing, and some days want to pull your hair out or, fire yourself or anything else.
And for me, it's really taking the lead about our own lives, knowing and being aware of what depletes us and what gives us passion, what gives us joy, and going for it and living according to what we want, not what someone else says we should do. And I think that really is about self-love. It's not about being selfish. We need to eliminate that word from our vocabulary.
Yeah, and for me, it is a theme I'd said earlier. You are a beautiful, beautiful work in progress. You have everything you need because you are human. And in the world of digital and in the world of abundance and in the world of overwhelm, you get to choose to be human. And that is enough. You're a work in progress. Celebrate that.
Thank you all for sharing your stories and your wisdom and spending some time today. I really appreciate it. And the comments were not coming through on the live stream, but they're there on LinkedIn. So if you have a moment, swing by and say hello to the people that were commenting. And thank you. Thank you. I look forward to keeping this conversation going.